for joining us for this Learn Something New Wednesday, where we have Chris Coladonato with us, who is the connection catalyst, the person who is just genius at connecting others and connecting people to their businesses and really bringing strength and clarity to teams. See, that's her superpower, man, and I love it. Although she did give me a really great idea, and as we were talking through this yesterday, about what song was on the radio when you first started your career in learning and development. So there's a thinking exercise for you.
I had a Google. It's been that many years.
I know. I think I'm going to have to Google that too.
And I did my entire career because I haven't always been an L&D. So I did the year I very first started as a full-time career person, whatever that would be.
Full-time career person. I'm thinking of my first official.
Yeah,
like
this was my first
L&D.
official full-time job is what I picked.
I'm picking my first official.
So I'll share the songs because you'll see this later. But for me, the two songs I picked out from the year that I had my first official job, like real job, career, whatever you want to call it. The two songs I picked out were Vogue by Madonna and Escapade by Janet Jackson. So if you know anything about those songs, you know it's been a minute since I've been in the workforce. I like Shannon is not telling us the year. She's just
I am not telling you
looking for the song.
I am. I'm looking for a good song.
It was tough. I was trying to remember. So mine was 1990. So I had to find what were the songs that were big in the 90s. I know the 90s.
Yeah.
Ooh, I like that, Lillian. I'm not going to sing it. I came really close to just start singing it, but nobody wants to hear that.
I'm old.
All right. So that was just a fun little exercise that I have as part of my personal user manual, which is one of the things that we're going to be talking about today. Two of the tools that I like to use the most as we think about clarity and building connections on teams are personal user manuals and team agreements. So I'm curious if anyone has ever used either one of these tools before. Go ahead and shout out in the chat if you have. Excellent. So Connie hasn't, but like the idea. Cool. All right. So Lily, I'm gonna want to hear so much more about that. Not good.
It's a big thumbs down from Lillian. She's like, this is more trouble than it's worth. Is that what this is? Lillian, want to share?
Are you comfortable sharing?
It makes me hate people, and it could take us years.
Oh my gosh.
You know, L&D were such creative people and such dramatic people and outspoken, and you can't even think of the questions that are going to come up. Oh, it's horrifying. And it's like my main project right now, so I might die from this.
Oh, we'll talk about some things that
on your gravestone died.
You might want to think about that might help. We'll talk about those a little bit later. It can be tough. Especially if you are leading it as part of the team, but we'll talk about that a little bit more.
I was going to say, just the teams that need it, I bet are all kinds of heck to put it together. They're not very friendly. They're not very nice about things. The teams that don't need it, you know, you could easily do one because it'd be no big deal.
Yeah. It's much easier for those, but I like to have external facilitators do it because it just makes it a little bit easier, but we'll talk about that a little bit more. So personal user manuals, let's start there. So personal user manuals are just that. They are an individual saying, here is how I work best. Here are some things that I think you need to know about me. And they generally have some of the things that you see on the screen in the body of them. So they might talk about communication. They could talk about working style, how I like to collaborate, strengths, opportunities. even how maybe I like to give or receive feedback, how I like to give or receive recognition. There really is no one right way, but the key here is it's an individual. So this is about me, my needs, how I work best, some things that you should know about me. We call them, user manuals because they're just that. They are the things that if somebody were to look at it, they'd be going, oh, okay, either one, that explains a lot, or two, here's some things I should be aware of. Now, one of the things you do need to know about personal user manuals is just like any user manual. I mean, I'll raise my hand. How many times have we taken a user manual and glanced at it and said, I don't need that? Yeah. I've ignored many user manuals, and I think many people here have. Yeah. So just because you create it doesn't mean you, one, will always get what you want. You do have to compromise because we all are coming from different areas and different needs. So we have to really think about, well, how can we compromise and what's negotiable for me and what isn't negotiable for me. But the other piece of this is, it is for you to give yourself clarity first. And the reason I say that is, how can you tell somebody or share with somebody what you need if you aren't clear about it yourself? Which is why I love to do personal user manuals, even if I don't share them with anybody. So that's kind of the beauty of it. And I like that you were sharing, Maureen, how I like to be managed. So it's a great thing when somebody new is coming on board, whether it's a new manager or whether it's a new employee. And we'll talk a little bit about how you might use them after we look at some examples. So, personal user manuals, here's, my thoughts, here's what I like, here's how I like to be managed, here's how I like to work. Team agreements, on the other hand, are the team coming together, making some decisions. And again, they can include things like communication. You'll often find, especially if the team is distributed, especially if they're distributed across time zones, you'll often find working hours on them. You might see meetings. How are we going to meet? The question that came in earlier, I think it was from Maureen, do you want webcams on or off? You'll often find that in a team agreement. What do we agree on? For the most part, webcams on, webcams off. You might also see things like connection opportunities. How are we, especially if we're distributed, how are we going to stay connected? With personal user manuals and team agreements, there is, and this is what kind of makes it complicated, as Lily was sharing earlier, there is no right or wrong way. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of combinations that you could put together. You could spend a ton of time sitting and coming up with questions for either one of these. And then I see Shannon's eyes going, oh yeah, you could. And then you're just going to be spinning your wheels. And then people get really passionate about, no, I want this included, I want that included, which is why it's really great to start with some bare bones. We'll talk about what some of those bare bones are. And then if you want, you can expand past. But you could just get stuck in your own personal user manual. I'm going to add this. I'm going to add this before I share it with somebody. Team agreements. Oh, we have to talk about this. We have to talk about this. We have to talk about this. No, I want this. So that's the caution, because the beauty of them is that they are whatever you want to put in them. That's also the downside. So pluses and minuses in every one of these. And I was looking at some of the chats coming through. You have to really think about what, and we'll talk about this, what is it that you're willing to share? What is it that you should share? A personal user manual doesn't have to include everything. However, it should include some things that, maybe are nice to knows. And we'll talk a little bit about those. It'll be really interesting to see what you come up with a little bit later today. All right. So any questions about what personal user manuals are and team agreements from kind of a high level perspective before we start diving into personal user manuals?
I would ask, how frequently would you say we should kind of revisit and update our personal user manual?
Yeah, it depends. So what I like to do when I've used these in the past with teams is we would meet every 6 months with here's what's changed. So they don't have to be, they could be once a year, twice a year. For a personal user manual, I wouldn't do it any more frequently than that. But if you're updating them, I recommend it's a conversation with the team, and it's a great conversation to have. Hey, here's what's happening. Here's what's different. Here's what's changed. So it's another way for you to refresh and have a conversation with your manager or your team.
Yeah, I was just thinking, because I know in the original note that was sent out, it was like your car has a user manual, like what about us? But so I was also thinking in terms of with cars, we also have kind of like the recommended service record and
Yep.
service manual.
Oh,
I
great
like that.
analogy.
Yeah, so that's why I was thinking, like, is there a recommended time? Is it like, you know, kind of like it's your 50,000 mile checkup. These are, these are the things you really need to focus on, like if there was anything like that. So,
Yeah,
and
it is really up to you, but I agree. It's to your point, Maureen, there are service notices and things like that. So this is a living document. It doesn't just go out there and stay out there and never get updated.
No, it sounds very interesting, and it's something that people don't do, and it probably would save a lot of time and create a lot of camaraderie if you were to take the time to do this, because it's like saying you are important to this team.
Mhm.
We want to
Oh,
know
great
this.
point.
So
Yeah.
I think this is great.
Yeah, it shows that you are seen if it's reviewed. So again, it's the caveat. Just because you put it out there doesn't mean it's going to get reviewed. And this is where it has to be intentional. So if you're doing this as a team, you do this, and then you want to make sure people take time to review it. But it also helps people to see you are seen. So especially if you use some of the information. So if Barbara puts on hers that Barbara cannot meet past 4 p.m., and I honor that. I said, Barbara, I know that you can't meet past 4 p.m. So what time today would work for you? That lets you know that I value you. I think you're important. I see you. So that can help with some of that too.
One of the things, although I've never had an actual personal user manual, I like that idea, but I have like a folder that I call profile, personal profile. Basically, it's the same thing. I just don't have it organized into some type of manual or anything. But I really like that idea because one, it helps me to go back and visit and help me feel more successful actually at times. The other morning, I was feeling really discouraged about just my abilities, my competencies. And yeah, I know I'm very experienced. I know that I'm, I'm really strong in several areas. And by going back over my profile, I actually help strengthen that in me to go, yeah, I do have that. I know what I'm doing. It's okay. The other way that I have used my profile in that is that to kind of share with someone, who I am. And I like that part that it brings that camaraderie that Barbara was talking about. And there's one person on my team that I am still trying to get to know. I don't know him because we're all remote at our company now, 100% remote, which I love. However, when I talk to him, I have anxiety because I don't know him, and I feel like I probably sound stupid or I sound whatever, sometimes because I don't know him. And it would have helped to have some little composite of this is who he is and this is what he likes. That's just my thoughts on it.
Yeah. Great thought on that. I'm sure we've all been in that position, right, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, it ramps up the get to know you. And again, even if I just glance at it, I get a sense of who Connie is or who Barbara is or who Jason is. And a lot of it also has to do with style. You'll see mine's a little tongue in cheek because I'm just a little tongue in cheek. I'm a little snarky, sassy. I have a bunch of tiaras that I'm looking at sitting right next to my desk. So of course mine is going to be a little bit funky and interesting. But that also lets people know the type of person I am. And Maureen, to your point, and that's why team agreements and user manuals can be really nice. They don't have to be that long, but if you do them at the start of a project, it can be a great way to lessen that ramp up time. I need to get to know you, but it also starts to build some trust between people because I get you. I see you. Oh, I didn't know you had a cat. I've got a cat, and we can have conversations about cats.
Yeah, I'm actually getting ready to possibly hire somebody new onto my team, and this is just like, I need to send her, get this built for her, and
Mhm.
this would be a great way to get somebody onboarded onto a team as well.
Exactly. It can be a great, so it can do two things. One, if you as a team have, even if you just have, and we'll talk about, even if you just have like 5 things, here are 5 things about Jason, here are 5 things about Connie. And then the new person gets to read all of those and then create their own, and they have a template and say, here's the 5 things you need to know about me. And then you can come to a meeting, and instead of, all right, Barbara, tell us 5 things you need to know about you. Lily, tell us 5 things. You can spend that time going, Jason, tell me a little bit more about, you wrote, I love soccer. Tell me a little bit more. What kind of teams? Things like that. So you can be a more productive introductory session instead of doing the same old, let's go around the room. Here's who we are. Here's where I came from. Do a little pre-read. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, and the team agreements is really the thing that I'd lean into, because like you said, I don't like meetings after 4 o'clock. I don't like them before 9. So set those parameters.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, in my profession, I'm a parliamentarian. I help people with board meetings and conventions and membership meetings.
Yeah.
So I would say 3-4 nights a week is when my meetings happen.
Ooh.
So my meetings are all at night. Mornings, like 9 to 12, is my time for myself to do what I want to do, like this seminar. Afternoons is when I get ready for my meetings. Now all my meetings are at night. So
Yeah, and that's something to let people know,
works.
hey, the morning is my time for me. Like, I would
Yes.
rather have meetings in the morning, certain times. Again, that's
yeah.
but
When
for
people want
you,
individual
you want 'em all.
personal, consultation, it's like any day, 9 to 12, I'm usually available. Nighttime, evenings, forget about it.
Yep. Yeah, so those are great things to know. So again, it just depends. Everybody's situation is different. So I'm not going to be calling Barbara for a meeting past, certain time, because her meetings are booked already. All right, let's dive into personal user manuals. I'm going to show you a couple of examples, and you'll start to see there is no right, there is no wrong. They're all very different. When you get the email from Shannon later today, you'll see some additional examples. So again, you can dive in and just start to look at what are some that are out there. But again, there's no right and no wrong. Now, if you're doing this with your team, I highly recommend, especially if you have a new team member coming in, highly recommend giving them a template. So don't have a free-for-all, but give them something to react to. And in the resources, you'll see a couple of examples. So here is one from someone in my network. And after I read her entire, and this will be included because hers is quite long, I only gave you a snapshot of it. Her and I have never met in person. Obviously, she lives in another country, but her and I are on connecting in Zoom quite a bit. And after I read her personal user manual, because she goes on to talk about some of her interests and likes, I was like, I think if we lived in the same town, you and I would be the best of friends. She likes to sew. She likes modern English, all kinds of things. And I'm like, right here, totally in on that. So she talks a little bit about, where because she does a lot of international work. So she talks a little bit about her languages as well as where she's based. And then she goes right into communication preferences. And her and I were talking about this. And for her, that's probably the biggest drawback or the biggest stumbling block a lot of people have working with her. They want to know, or they automatically default to a Slack versus an email. She likes email. I'm more of an I am kind of a person. So for her, it's easier to organize. She is all about having agendas like me, needing to know what a meeting is for. So the things that tripped people up the most when they are working with her, those are the things she rose to the top. So that's why she chose those. And then she puts personal interest later. Another example, this is something a little bit different. Somebody just put a little bit of about me. Here's a little bit, here's who I am. And then what do I expect? I like, they kind of gave it from an aspect of, here's what I expect of myself, and here's what I expect of others. This one is used with his team a lot. He shares it with his team. He wrote a little bit about it. But I do like how, as I'm reading this, it kind of makes me get to know him a little bit more just because of the approach that he took. Instead of, here are 5 facts, here's how I like to communicate. So you can see these two are extremely different. Now I'll show you another one that's even more different. So this one starts with values and culture. One thing I see in a lot of team agreements, and it's in one of the templates you'll get, they talk about gold stars. Here's how to get a gold star from me. So you can see under collaboration, they have gold stars. I like people who are tactical, can explain something super complex, consistently keeps me in the loop on things that are relevant to me. So this one started with values, then moved into collaboration. The one thing I'd like to highlight here is the quirk at the end. So I kind of like that she put quirks in there. And this is a hot button for me. If I were to read this, I would actually sit down and have a conversation with her. Because as you'll see on my personal user manual, I cannot stand when somebody is late to a meeting. And here she says, I run late to meetings a lot. It's not personal, more to do with meetings running over or my poor time management skill. But to me, that's an issue of respect. And it is a hot button. And I would actually sit down and have a conversation with her and say, let's have a conversation about this because I see it. I know you say it's not personal, but how can I help you? Maybe we can do some meetings that are shorter and I can help you think through that because it's a sign of respect to me. So having something like this really can help if you get out in front of it and you can see it. And then you can say, okay, here's something. I saw that. I was glancing at it. I'm like, woo, red flag, red flag. Nope, not. I cannot. It really is. It grates on me and I'm going to stop talking about it because it is that irritating to me. So you can see how they can be a way for you to get in front of something, have a conversation starter. I know she said it isn't personal, but it would be a conversation for the two of us. How are we going to work through this? Because I'm always on time. I expect people to respect my time and be on time. And you're saying you're always late. So let's talk about it. Now I'll show you my personal user manual so you can see something that is even a little bit different. All right, so my personal user manual, one of the things that I added that I think everybody should start adding is either an audio file or a phonetic on how to say your name. So one of the things I have in there is how to say Cola Donato because it is a mouthful. It's something that is not quite easy to say. I talk a little bit about, here's who I am. This is where you see the question. I started my career the year that Escapade by Janet Jackson and Vogue by Madonna came out. I roll into here's some of my previous lives. This gives people some context. And then I added something I like because mine is a little bit long. So as you're scrolling through it, it's like, whoa, that's a little bit. So I did a little too long, don't read. And I did basically this or that lightning round. And as you can see on here, there's some fun little things in here. And then there's some things that are important to me. So I prefer instant messaging over email. Just don't send me an email. Send me an IM, especially if it's urgent. I like to work in bursts. I can't power through. My mind just doesn't work that way. If you want me to ideate on something, I prefer to do it asynchronously and brainstorm that way and maybe on a Miro board or a shared document versus, hey, let's all get together. I would rather work early than late. Mountains over beach. Here's an important one. Disco over pop. I mean, who doesn't love good disco? Movies at home versus friends with a party, with friends versus going to a party. So you can see mine also shows that's just my personality. I should have worked tiaras in there somewhere. I have a love for tiaras. It's a long story. But then the other things that are really important to me are things like communications. So meeting musts. If I don't have knowledge of what the meeting is about, I don't accept it. I will send it back and say, please tell me what this is. What are you hoping to accomplish? I never, ever accept a meeting unless I know what it's about. Comms, a little bit more, video emails. I love a video email. It helps people to start to understand a little bit why I like them because they give more context. I added, I do my best work when. So for me, I do my best work when I'm given time to think and respond. So if you send me pre-work, because we're going to discuss it in a meeting, I can be prepared. I can think on my feet, but I do much better when you give me time to prepare. I like to have breathing space. I like to vary my working environments. Don't ask me to stay in the same place all the time. And then I add a little fun facts and miscellany. So this is where if you do things like StrengthsFinder or DISC or any other kind of assessments in your workplace, that might be a good place to put them. And then I put some personal things. I got into paint by numbers when I was in during COVID. So I've done a couple paint by number things, which you see behind me. My cat Amber, who is not here because she's locked out of the room and she's very mad about that. You usually see her on video calls. So you can start to see all of the examples that I shared with you, none of them are exactly the same. And this is where, to Lilianne's point, the same thing happens with team agreements, is this can be a source of frustration because people are like, well, wait a minute, how am I supposed to, and then they just get tripped up and then they never, ever move forward. All right, so are we ready to create our own personal user manuals? Take a run at it? All right, but Maureen's got a look on her face that says, I'm not sure about this.
She's in.
All right, so we'll give you a template just like I walk through with everybody else. So the first thing I want you to do is I want you to just 3 things about you that you think other people should know. So write down 3 things about you that you think people should know. What's a gut response? The reason we also are going through this so you can see where you stumble, and that might be a signal. This might be things that other people may stumble with. So when I ever have somebody new doing a personal user manual, I always show mine first so they can see here. I've been open. I'd like you to share 3 things about you that you are comfortable sharing. Again, personal or professional. So Barbara, yours could all be professional.
So is the purpose of this to get to know the person, to have something to start a conversation? Or is it to know more about your personality and how to interact with the person?
Yes, and yes to all of that. So all of these, when you're creating a personal user manual, if you're sharing them with others, they do all of that. They help you have some context about the person. And then it could also be a way for me to start the conversation. So instead of me wondering what the heck, I'm just meeting Barbara for the first time. What am I going to talk to Barbara? Hey, Barbara, how you doing? That's when I could sit there and say, okay, Barbara, you're newly retired. Tell me about some of the things that you're doing and enjoying in your retirement. A much richer conversation than, hey, Barbara, how you doing? So it does both. Great question, though.
And I'll add on a personal note. Chris and I have known each other for a long time, but we also, we talk every week. And a good compromise between Chris and I, knowing that I'm not a morning person, but Chris is that we meet, when we talk, we meet mid-morning. So that way I still have coffee and I have part of my brain cells awake, and Chris is, ready to, lend her energy while she still has energy in the morning. So those are the sorts of compromises that you can make when you know these things about each other.
Yeah, it again, it lessens that, I need to get to know. And just because I'm a morning person, I don't expect Shannon to meet with me at 9 a.m. I don't. I know that for her, that would not go well. She could do it, but
could do
let's-
it.
let's compromise. So that's the other piece of this. As we look through some of these, you'll start to see, okay, what are my non-negotiables? And what are my negotiables? So if I know that for me, my brain power lessens as the day goes on. And I used to work for an organization. We were spread out all across the United States and even had some out in Zurich. And if they asked me to meet like 3 o'clock or later, I was not at my best. And I'm like, I'm just going to be honest. I am not at my best. So if you want me to lead a project, we're going to have to meet prior to that so I can be a fully effective project facilitator. So one of the things I always recommend, even though some of you put this already, is I'd love you to come up with what's your top one, how to communicate with me. This can be anything related to communication. So what's the top thing? For me, it's send me an IM. Don't send me an email. Send me an instant message. But that's just me. So what's the top thing that you think someone who is working with you needs to know? And the next one I'd like you to think of, what's the top thing about your work style? How you like to work, where you like to work, how you like to process information. Could be any of that. How you like to structure your day. The next one that I think is really good is you get my best when. So for me, this is you get my best when I have time to think. You get my best when you don't ask me to sit in back-to-back meetings. And then I'll give you one more to choose from. You can choose to share, come up with what's your superpower, your Achilles heel, or how you like to receive feedback. So did it provide you any clarity for yourself and make you think about how you like to work? And how do you think this experience would be? You know, Jason, let's go back to your example. How do you think an experience like this would be for a new hire to go through?
I think it'd be great, especially because they want to let people know who they are and get that right. And as their leader, I want to know like how best to communicate with them. And this is an easy way for them to just kind of say, this is the best way, instead of us kind of fumbling for the first month or so. And then coming back like, I like it when you do, I need you to do it this way. And find out, oh, okay, well, we're really not connecting as a team then because we don't know how to communicate.
Yep. And that's where the team agreement can be really powerful too.
I like that it really makes you think about who you are internally, you know, doing the primal scream at people. Why do they do this? And it's because we really haven't communicated to them that that sort of behavior is not effective, you know, with me, or, you know, they just didn't know that that's not how I like to communicate or how I like to receive information. So I think that exercise in of itself was really important for me personally.
Yeah, it really helps you to frame up again, as I share, it's negotiables and non-negotiables. And if I can share, here are some non-negotiables, then I feel much more comfortable, even if I do have to compromise, which happens a lot in team agreements. You do have to compromise, but at least I know and I'm clear and I can articulate that then because I know what's important to me.
Thank you, Barbara. I just wanted to say that this is going to be so valuable because what I'm running up against is people don't realize everyone's not them. Everyone thinks we all like this and we all forgive that. And yeah, we are all different people. So it's really been eye-opening. Thank you.
All right, let's shift gears a little bit because the personal user manual, I think, is a great thing to do before you do a team agreement. Because to your point, Lillian, it helps people to see everybody's different. But you can use it then as a basis for team agreements. So when you think about a team agreement, it's taking the personal user manual and kind of amping it up a little bit. And it's from the team perspective. These have to be team decisions. So one thing I find that can make team agreements difficult is, one, if a manager is saying, here's how we're going to work. And I want you all to agree to it. That's not a team agreement. That's why some people call them team charters, because you form a charter, you work together to form a charter. And somebody telling you, here's how we work, the team hasn't agreed to it, me signing off on it doesn't mean anything. The other piece of this is somewhat to what Lillian's running into. This is a compromise. This is what we as a team are agreeing to do. These should be living documents. So when you first do a team agreement, this is something that, okay, here's what we're going to do. I usually recommend revisiting within at least a month to see how's the initial kind of agreements working. All right, we said that we're going to use calendar. We want everybody to search calendars before they send an email about meeting times. How's that working? What issues are you running into? Is it working for everybody? Is it not? Let's talk about that. And then you can get to a point where I recommend visiting it once a quarter. So after you do the first one, come back within a couple of weeks, about a month. How's this working? Let's have a conversation about it. And then it's something that you can revisit. Is there something that's changed in the team? You got somebody new on the team. When you're bringing in somebody new, you don't just tell them, here's how we work. You have a conversation about it. Let's talk about this. I'd love for you to see our team agreement and then talk about what things might you have suggestions for, or what really doesn't work for you. And let's talk about that. So one example I like to give, we used to do these before project teams, and they're great if you have a project team, especially if they're going to be working together for a while. I like IMs. I don't like to work through email. The entire team wanted to work via email. I was the only one who wanted to use WebEx chat for the bulk of our conversations back and forth, because I just don't like to use email for that. So that was my compromise. But then I asked, if we're going to use email, I do have some requests. We use a shared project file. We use shared documents. The bulk of the work happens there, and you link to it from your email, and you are very careful with your reply alls, and you don't just send an email that says thank you. So I asked for a compromise because I know I prefer to work in IMs, but I also know that I was in the minority. So here's where we need to compromise. And Lillian, this is where an external facilitator comes in handy. I was comfortable doing it with the project team because I was one of the people leading the project team. And I knew that if I wanted it to be successful, I could not put my foot down and say, we're all going to use IM. But if you have an external facilitator, they are somebody, even if they're from a different team, they're somebody who can help you work through some of those, because you can get spun up. I don't like to do this. I like to do that. So we just walk through a user manual. I'd love for you to think through and either raise your hand or just call it out or chat it in. What might be some of the topics or questions that you might have and ask the team to make an agreement on?
I would say team meetings, how, like, what works for people. So how often, how do you want to meet? Because we're hybrid right now. So in person or remote. And are there some things better in person and some types of meetings that work better remote?
Yeah, I like that, especially for hybrid.
And to add on that one, how long should these meetings last? In a previous organization, we all made an agreement that we would never do full 60 minutes. They would be 50 to 55 minutes.
They're great thing to have a conversation about.
Now, did we stick with that and did it actually work? No. But we kept coming back to, we all agreed to this. And like, why is Jason the only one who schedules a 50-minute meeting? Everybody else.
And that's the piece about a team agreement. If you have it, it's a living document. You put it somewhere in a box or Dropbox or wherever, and then you can go back to it. So you've got something. It's not that, hey, we had a conversation, but nobody remembers what that conversation was. No. Here's what we agreed to. And it's a little bit easier than me saying, well, Jason, why do you, I can go team agreement. What else? So meetings, conduct at meetings. That's another good one. Webcams on or off. We always had conversations about participation, using chat. We always had options. So some people weren't as comfortable using chat in terms of facilitating using chat. And we asked, you need to give people options, because if you have a meeting with 15 people in it, not everybody's going to be able to share vocally. Some people also might want to share via chat. So Lily's question is, we're struggling on what agreement means. Do the yays have it, or must it be a consensus, or must all agree?
Yeah, no, it's really kind of sort of interesting because this idea of a personal user manuals and team agreements, is this something new, or is this something that's been around for a while?
They've been around for a while. I've been using them since I went remote in 2008. I think they were around before then. So they're not new, but they've traditionally been in remote teams and distributed teams. And now
Right.
that more people are going remote, you're seeing this more and more. So Barbara would do a vote. Any other votes on what agreement means?
I would try and solicit some kind of compromise before you made a hard decision. If someone, if the discussion is, well, let's have our regular meetings at 10 o'clock in the morning on Tuesdays, and someone says, well, I can't make Tuesdays because I have to go to line dancing or something. I would say, well, instead of 10, would 10:30 work, or is it another day of the week? I wouldn't just out and out say, well, you don't have a choice. It's 10:30, it's 10 o'clock on Tuesday, and that's it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
would
and
search
this is
for
where an
compromise,
external facilitator really helps.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
having that. That's why it's tough, especially if you're a team that is so invested in this. It makes it nice. But I'm very similar to Barbara. It's like, all right, well, let's see how many. And if it's, one or two holdouts, let's have a conversation about that. Is there an opportunity for compromise? You're never going to get everybody to agree, almost never. Because to your point you made earlier, Lillian, we are all different. So it's going to have to be a compromise. I usually go with majority rules. We try it out. Let's try it for a couple of weeks and a month, and then come back and see how it's working.
Yeah, that's been like a 3-meeting thing so far, is how many votes have to be. Is it the ayes have it? And so, yeah, is it a quorum? How many people had to be at the meeting? There's 10 of us. Do all 10 of us have to be at the meeting in order to vote on things like what time the meetings are? I'm finding too that people tend to want to be sure they are there, but they don't care who else is there, right? So as long as I'm there, the vote counts. And that was going to be kind of my question to Barbara is, so when you take a vote, has everybody agreed that the ayes will have it? Or do we say we maybe want to pose some questions? And external facilitator is sounding better and better all the time.
I come from a totally different world. A lot of what we've talked about is something that you just typically do when you have like a new board of directors or invite new members. You explain to them, this is what we do and how we do the process. I've never seen it done formally. I really like the idea. And basically, it depends upon the nature of the organization. But in my world, the people that take the time to show up at the meeting and participate are the ones that get to make the decisions. And yes, some people have conflicts and they can't participate, but we can't always run our lives based upon the exceptions. So it's the people that actually attend the meetings are the ones that get to vote. And I know that's not good for the people that just can't attend, but they, like you said, 3 meetings. I mean, how long does it take to make some basic decisions? And I expect, Shannon, that we'll be getting some kind of template with questions to use to guide us on what we need to decide.
Yeah, so one of the things, so yes, you're going to get that. Lillian, one of the things that I recommend is doing a mural or a Miro board prior and have everybody collaborate. So it goes back to Arit's point about see if each person clarifies. So you can have the questions up on a mural or Miro board or any other, whiteboard, have people share their insights and thoughts, and then you can come together. So then you can take a look at it and say, here's the things we all thumbs up. We're all going to be Tuesdays at 10. Here are the sticking points. And then can you also give people an opportunity, because they can't be at that meeting, can they share their thoughts? Here's what we're going to vote on. Cast your votes. If they can cast them before or asynchronously, it takes that power away. Because that way you've got the people that are, again, I'm going to be there. I don't care if anybody else is there because I want my voice heard. Let's level the playing field and take it offline using Miro, whiteboard, whatever whiteboard option you have. All right, other thoughts on team agreements. So I'll share, here's some that I've used in the past. We've talked about communication, core hours, especially if you're distributed. So what are the core hours we're going to work synchronously? Meaning, here's the times when you can schedule meetings. Here's when you can expect me to respond quickly to emails. This is great if you're all across different time zones. How are we going to give each other feedback? How do we know what everybody's working on? What kind of information do we need to share? If your organization doesn't have a standard shared drive, what is your shared drive? Where do you use it? We had 4. So we had to pick one as a team. We had 4 different places we could share information. So people were sharing it here, there, here. Let's pick the one. Here's another one where, we talked about in different buckets. So what types of information do we need to share with each other? What does success look like for the team? Getting really clear about that. What tools are we going to use and when for communication? One of the ones I like to use, how will we ensure all team members are included during meetings? That goes back to making sure that everybody has an opportunity to have a voice and not just the people who like to talk all the time. We will use chat. We will turn webcams on or off. We use captioning. You can continue on and on. If you're hybrid or distributed, connection is also a really great one. How are we going to stay together as a team? If we're hybrid and we're all local, do we want to agree to meet and say maybe once a month, do something like a volunteer activity or have lunch? If you're not all in the same location, how are we going to all be able to do that? We don't want just everybody that's in one location to get together and forget about the others. So again, these are just some examples of how you can do it. There is no right. There is no wrong.
I think my question or thought here is, if you're thinking about team agreements, would it be fair to say, like you said, start small, but would you prioritize? It's like, I know that this team has struggles communicating. So maybe we need to put more depth into that particular section.
Yeah, it goes back to, where are we struggling? What, if we solve for this, would make us be that much more effective as a team? So if you are noticing that you have people putting documents in 5 different locations, people, having issues making certain meetings, then let's put our focus on how do we communicate and collaborate as a team? And to your point, you can go deep in that. And again, if that's all you do, and you do it well, think how much better the team cohesion will be. Think how much more clarity, you'll have less back and forth going on. So if you just do something about communication, collaboration, and that's all you do, that's an awesome team agreement. It really is. So what's important to the team? Where's the team struggling? Where, if you saw for this, everybody knew it was happening, would it make it that much more effective? So Lillian, no kitchen sink. And that's the other thing is, they'll try to put every single decision in there. What's most important now?
So
What's
maybe
most
it needs to start with a goal statement.
The goal of the team agreement, the goal of the team.
No, the goal of the team agreement. So the goal of the team agreement is to, help us work
Mhm.
positively or effectively, or this is why we're doing this, especially for teams that might be new,
Agree. Yeah. That's a
to
good
the
idea.
concept,
Mhm.
or maybe are dysfunctional.
Yeah. I can see that being really useful for the dysfunctional. As we come together to almost have it as a filter. So if we want to work more effectively, then we really need to agree on this, this, and this.
And as a living, breathing document,
Mhm.
do you have recommendations for where to store it? Is it something that needs, you said you address it somewhat regularly, but is there, is it something that people should, keep in a Google file? So if people want to add notes to it, they can, or, what's
It's
the
gotta-
recommendation?
So it needs to be in a shared folder somewhere. It depends on what your organization uses. So put it somewhere that the entire team can access. That's the key point. So whether that is Google, Box, Dropbox, you name it, OneDrive, but it needs to be somewhere. I've seen teams do it as a OneNote. Wow, I forgot what that thing was. And so it's just a OneNote file, but the entire team can access it. So it's got to be somewhere everyone can access, and that is editable, to your point. So we need to be able to edit it. I've seen teams, and you'll see some examples, they're mural boards. Entire team can access it. The team agreement is on a mural board. So as long as the entire team can access it, doesn't matter what format it is, needs to be editable, needs to be accessible. Don't try to solve for everything. Just solve for a few things.
Mhm.
And try it out. See how it
Mhm.
goes.
Right, because you can always build on it, it's,
Yes.
I like that recommendation. Targeted, perhaps, small, short. But I think I would also, I wonder, is there benefit? And I noticed that what we did is that we started with some personal stuff,
Mhm.
the dogs, the cats, etc. 95% of our conversations about our agreements went to the professional side, how to communicate with me, how to email or not email, etc. So now I'm wondering, is there, I realize that every team is going to have different dynamics about how personal it wants to get, but is there benefit to add to sprinkling in those personal anecdotes? Because I noticed yours had a number of personal type of anecdotes. So is there benefit to encouraging the team to add those sorts of little sprinkles in?
In their user manuals?
Yeah, in their user
Yeah.
manuals.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I usually ask for 1 to 3 things. I encourage them to share as much as they're comfortable sharing, but I usually like to ask for 1 to 3 things that are about you, that will help others understand you. again, what you're comfortable sharing.
Mhm.
I'm an oversharer. Hi, my name is Chris. I'm an oversharer. And I am very comfortable sharing random acts of tiaras. Not everybody is as comfortable. But as you're having conversations with people and you let them know that this is, you're sharing it with your team and those that you choose to share this with, the more context they have about you, the better the conversations can be. And I can get to know you quicker when I know a little bit more about you. But again, I want to respect your privacy
Mhm.
and how you like to share. But yeah, I usually ask for 1 to 3 things.
Okay.
Or someone said something about there's a person that they work with that they don't know at all for anything about them. If
Mhm.
people know a few things about you, they tend to become more comfortable with you, and they're going to be more trusting of you, and they're going to be more forgiving and more willing to work with you during the process. So I think it is important to establish some kind of a personal communications. And people say it's so difficult on Zoom meetings, and I'm totally opposite. I feel like all of you guys are in my living room talking with me right now. We're the best of friends. I mean, I love Zoom and having this communication. So, I'm a disbeliever in what some people say, but this is an important process. I've learned a lot. Like someone said, it's the inward thinking, finding out more about yourself that's made this very valuable. So I certainly appreciate the opportunity to meet with y'all today.
Well, thank you. And I think that's a great place to leave this conversation.
Mhm.
That's a great closing statement, Barbara. You're hired.
Oh, thank you.
Because we are at time, and this has been very valuable. I know it's been valuable for me. I hope it's been valuable to you. And I see in the chat where people are sharing the love, Chris. So thank you so much.
I've
for-
stolen some of your ideas, leverage some of the things that you all shared, and they are
Leverage.
now in my notebook to add to my personal user manual.
So again, thank you everybody for joining me today. And Chris, thank you so much for your time and generosity of knowledge. We certainly appreciate it. And thank you everyone also for breaking out of, I know sometimes it's uncomfortable to have these conversations. So thank you for being so generous in sharing your thoughts and ideas for this particular topic. And I hope to see you at another Learn Something New Wednesday soon. Thank you again. Have a wonderful
Thank
rest
you.
of your day.